Just testing. Let's just test this. Okay, let's just make sure the mic's working. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1. Okay. Let's definitely not have that during the actual speech. So I'll just keep going. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Oof. Still a bit touch and go. Okay, I'm just. Ladies and gentlemen, you're just going to keep hearing me go testing 1, 2, 3. Testing. Oh, wow. Okay. This is. I'm glad I'm doing this. I'm going to keep trying. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Just want to let you know before we kick off proceedings that the mic is a little bit iffy. So if there's the odd occasional, I was telling people that it's similar to what's been happening with the Labour Greens government. Just the quality checks and sometimes going off track a little bit. So just letting you know. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming in today to Auckland Central. I have the distinct pleasure of hosting all of you. Thank you so much for so many people. And I'd like to acknowledge a few people first. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge Mana Whenua, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, I'd like to acknowledge them. Outside of this, I'd also like to acknowledge party board members and a whole host of my fellow peers, MPs and candidates. I won't go through that because that'll be the whole list. Outside of that, just want to call out bathrooms at the back. That's what I'm here for, to let you know these important details. Bathrooms at the back, and if there's any special situations, like a fire or anything, there'll be a person right at the back directing traffic. Outside of this, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing the next Finance Minister of New Zealand, Nicola Willis.
How good is Mahesh?
Very good.
Let's make him the next MP for Auckland Central. I have to say, when I look out into this room full of people I know have worked hard to contribute to New Zealand and make it a better place, I feel optimism. But actually, New Zealand today is in a very tough place. Yesterday, Grant Robertson declared victory for the New Zealand economy. He grabbed onto figures showing GDP growth in the second quarter of this year. He grabbed onto them as if our country's economic battle had been won. It is fantasy land stuff and completely out of step with the grim reality facing far too many New Zealanders, working harder than ever, yet struggling more than ever to keep up with their rent, their mortgage, their ever bigger grocery bills. In Grant Robertson's universe, squeezed households and businesses should view the second quarter GDP figure as the cure. Here, in the real New Zealand, the cost of living crisis rages on. Our country continues to live well beyond its means, and the economic outlook is forecast to get bleaker still. The Reserve Bank forecasts predict that the economy has started shrinking again, and will stay that way until the end of the year, with 6 months of negative growth adding up to recession. Meanwhile, the Treasury is forecasting that on a per-person basis, growth will be flat until the end of next year. International forecasters predict New Zealand will be limping along, with growth below that of other advanced economies. Meanwhile, we do win one gold medal. Our current account deficit remains the biggest in the developed world, at 7.5% of GDP, meaning more of what we buy is going on the national credit card. We are collectively living beyond our means. And in this context, yesterday's GDP data should be viewed more as a gasp from a patient lying flat on the table. A sign of life, for sure, but predictions of recovery are dangerously premature. We are crawling along the economic bottom, and for most New Zealanders, it feels like recession. And that is because New Zealand is now entering its third year of a cost of living crisis. Prices for everything have gone up and wages have not kept up. Food price inflation is even higher than general inflation, with food prices up 30% in 6 years and rents up an average of $180 a week. Inflation out of control at 6% is predicted by many to stay well outside our targets for some time yet. And this puts us out of step with other countries. Do not believe the government when they say it's all global factors. In other countries, inflation is falling rapidly, with latest data putting Australian inflation at 4.9%, Canada at 4%, the US at 3.7%, and Japan at 3.3%. And as a result of our high inflation, interest rates are remaining higher to counter it, with the 2-year fixed mortgage now up over 7% at most commercial banks, crushing homeowners across the country and making it very difficult to start or grow a business. A family looking this week to refix a typical mortgage on a 2-year fixed rate will need to find an additional $700 a fortnight. The Reserve Bank has been forced to crank interest rates higher and higher because Grant Robertson has refused to control government spending. And that's because, just like with the GDP figure yesterday, he has been living in denial. In May 2022, he described inflation as a temporary challenge. He then embarked on a massive budget spend-up, with new spending well in excess of previous budgets, doubling down on his pumping of the money hose right when the economy desperately needed some constraint. Inflation hit 7.3% in the June quarter of that year. It stayed stubbornly high, and still Grant Robertson kept spending. 3 Waters, Auckland Light Rail, spending on consultants, TVNZ-RNZ merger, cost of living payments for French backpackers, increases in departmental back office budgets, the income insurance scheme, merging the Polytechs, all were apparently more important to Labour than getting inflation under control. And while New Zealanders have been doing more with less, this government has achieved less with more. Debt has gone from $5.4 billion in 2019 to a forecast of $100 billion next year. And that is $13 billion higher than forecast just 4 years ago. 4 months ago. Just 4 months ago. And paying the interest on that debt will soon cost $11 billion a year. That's more than the government spends on primary and secondary schools. In fact, New Zealand's debt is now our 4th largest area of spending after social security and welfare, health and education. Labour's reckless spending and economic mismanagement has got us here. New Zealanders simply cannot trust Labour to get us out of this mess. Finance Minister Grant Robertson has never stuck to a spending limit he has set himself, not one. Now, I know governments will, from time to time, face economic shocks, and the COVID pandemic was one. And it was appropriate then to increase spending to support New Zealanders. But instead of spending falling as lockdowns ended and the wage support measures eased, Grant Robertson just kept spending. Incredibly, government spending this year will be $30 billion higher than in either 2020 or 2021, which were the peak of the COVID support measures. The government is spending $1 billion more a week than when National was in office. And Treasury is currently forecasting a larger deficit this year than in 2021, when the border was shut and periodic lockdowns prompted billions of dollars in support payments. The spending may have been justified during COVID, but there is no justification for the waste that has occurred since. And it is impossible for New Zealanders to believe that Grant Robertson will ever get it under control. Treasury's hopeful forecast when it opened the books was that New Zealand will get its books back in balance in 2027. Just remember, that's the third time surplus has been delayed. And today I make this prediction. If a Labour, Greens, Te Pāti Māori coalition of chaos is returned, that will never happen. Our books will stay out of balance. Instead, New Zealand would be held hostage to a reckless government that promises to put a wrecking ball of new taxes through our economy, all while spending more than ever on failed government program after government program. So the choice at this election is stark. One way lies severe economic risk. The other way lies a national government that will do what needs to be done to rebuild our economy. No wonder I keep meeting people who say to me, and you will have met them too, if National doesn't win this election, I'm leaving. And I am deeply concerned by New Zealanders' lack of confidence in the future. Many people are feeling desperate about keeping their home, about running their small business and simply paying for the groceries. And the 40,000 New Zealanders who've left recently show you that too many Kiwis are seeing better opportunities and a lower cost of living in a different country. And if they saw a brighter future here, I believe many more of them would stay. And so that, to me, is one of the challenges of an incoming national government, giving people reasons to stay. Now, none of this will be achieved with silver bullets. We promised today no grand Kiwi build type scheme. That approach, Labour's approach, has failed. Instead, we promise a return to economic orthodoxy, to doing the basics well, to incrementally removing barriers and creating the economic conditions for success. And in doing so, we must do something else as well. We need to give New Zealanders confidence back that there will be a government that looks after the economy and backs them to succeed. We need to give them hope that we have the practical tools to allow them to get ahead here at home. We will be a government that makes progress across many, many fronts. Soon Christopher will lay out for you 100 decisive actions we will take to rebuild our economy. But more than any of those individual actions lies this. Our task is to give New Zealanders who work hard and invest confidence that this can once again be a country where they can get ahead. And I want people to vote at the ballot box so they don't vote with their feet. Let me now hand over to Christopher to talk about our plan to rebuild the economy.
Well, Well, thank you, Nicola, and I think you see someone there has a very good grasp of our economy. Nicola is incredibly intelligent, incredibly hardworking. She's going to make an outstanding Finance Minister of New Zealand. Can I say ka nui te mihi kia koutou, kia ora, good morning everybody. Thank you so much for coming along and spending time with us to hear about our common sense action plan to actually rebuild this economy so that all New Zealanders can get ahead. Now, it's just 22 days until the election, which I think will be a referendum on Labour's mismanagement of this economy. And it is a great opportunity for New Zealanders to change the direction of our country and by electing a national-led government. Now, when you strip out all the noise of this campaign, and there is certainly a lot of noise, it all boils down to one thing, and that is the economy. That is what this election will be all about. It's all about how we get our economy working, so we reduce the cost of living, and so that New Zealanders can get ahead. But I'd say to you that all Kiwis across New Zealand today know that our economy is going backwards, the country is going backwards, and they know that our economy is in bad shape. And that is because it is. And they see it and they feel it each and every single day. But I have to tell you, it doesn't have to be like this. It can be so much better. Now, when Nicola and I talk about the economy, it's not just about the numbers, it's actually about people. It's about jobs, it's about opportunities, it's about incomes, it's about saving and spending and borrowing, and about the big and the small decisions that all of us make as individuals, as families, as businesses, and indeed as we do as a government as well. A strong economy actually pays for the things that more of the things that New Zealanders need and the things that we want and expect the government to provide. But to have more, we have to earn more. And the economy is what underpins our standard of living for all of us. So the economic picture is bad news for every single New Zealander. And what's most frustrating, as Nicola outlined, is that it just didn't have to be this way, but thanks to Labour's economic mismanagement, it is. So Nicola is absolutely right that many New Zealanders are losing confidence in New Zealand's future, but I say that things do not need to be like this, and that under a national government I lead, they will not be like this. No matter how badly Labour has mismanaged the economy, and again I think Nicola outlined the picture incredibly accurately, we still have all the potential to be a successful country where people can actually realise their version of the Kiwi dream, whatever that may be. As I said, this election is about the economy, and the economy is about people. And National knows that our future will be built on the hard work of Kiwis and businesses and communities up and down this great country. And it is the government's role to actually support that with good infrastructure, with education, with sensible regulation and disciplined government spending. And that's why at this election we are delivering a common sense plan to support Kiwis and to make it much easier for them to have a go. Easier to invest, easier to innovate, easier to employ, and easier to take a punt. And our policies are going to grow the pie for all of us because National understands that before you spend money, you need to be able to earn it. So today we're announcing National's plan for rebuilding the economy, and our plan has 100 common sense actions that will end the cost of living crisis, improve incomes, and give Kiwis reasons to see their future here at home. Now, the 100 actions outlined will set the conditions for growth. They are the things that many New Zealanders and many of you here in this room in the business community have been asking for. Now, rest assured, I'm not going to take you through each individual 100 actions because I sense that there was some anticipation that that may happen. I could go for 7.5 hours doing so, but I don't think you'll fully appreciate it. So what I'd like to do is stay a little high level, and actually what we've done is group each of those 100 actions into 6 key clusters or drivers of economic growth. And I'll give you a bit of a flavour and a snapshot for each of those. And if you want me to talk about the 100 actions, I'm going to give you a handout at the end, so I'll read it when you get back home. The first thing, look, we've talked about the drivers of growth, and the first is actually stopping the wasteful spending and getting our books back in order. And I think Nicola has spoken powerfully about that over a number of months now. The first bunch of our initiatives are therefore more about treating our taxpayers with respect and bringing fiscal discipline back to Wellington. National is not going to treat our taxpayers as a bottomless ATM to be raided at will. So our initiatives include actions like reducing spending on consultants and contractors by $400 million a year, reducing government spending by $594 million, which, just putting it into perspective, is about 0.5% of total government spending. And we're going to put those savings towards giving tax relief to low and middle income, hard-working New Zealanders in the squeezed middle. And then we're going to put a stop to costly bureaucratic mergers and restructures and slash the use of working groups and task force and reviews to develop policy when so many agencies have such large policy teams within them. Our second driver is about delivering tax relief. And the IRD will today and also tomorrow, and in fact the day after the next day and every day this year, collect $125 million more in tax each day compared with Kiwis just what they collected 6 years ago. And when you think about that, that is $23,000 more tax on average being paid by every Kiwi household this year. Now, New Zealanders deserve tax relief, and our plan is carefully targeted at the squeeze middle. So we are going to shift income brackets to compensate for inflation, as well as making specific adjustments for families with children. And that result is that an additional $250 a fortnight in the hands of a household on the average wage with young children and childcare is incredibly meaningful. That is meaningful tax relief. And our plan means an additional $50 a fortnight for a single person on the median wage. And it also means an additional $26 a fortnight for a couple receiving New Zealand superannuation. We will, as we said we would, restore interest deductibility for landlords, and we will stop work on Labour's jobs tax. Now, our third driver is about cutting red tape. And I've talked about this lately to both the primary sector, where you can scarcely see the paddocks, I'd say, for the red tape that's in place. Farmers I talk to regularly up and down this country now spend 30% of their week form filling and doing paperwork, not doing the farming. And so we're going to end Labour's war on farming. We also want to boost the tech and the tertiary education sectors. We're going to change the immigration settings to make immigration a more flexible and helpful tool to ease the skill shortages where we have them. And under national, any new regulations will need to be justified on outcomes, not on politics and spin. We're going to restore the 90-day trials because they make sense. We're going to scrap the fair pay agreements that are all about imposing union deals on Kiwi workplaces, whether they want them or not. Now, fourthly, we really are going to get infrastructure built. High-quality infrastructure drives economic growth, it boosts our productivity, and it enhances our way of life. And New Zealand has a really large infrastructure deficit, which is contributing to unaffordable housing, congestion, and poor water quality as infrastructure as well. We'll establish, as we've talked about, our National Infrastructure Agency to connect domestic and international investors with infrastructure investment opportunities, because New Zealand is not good at doing that right now. In addition, we're going to build roads. We won't be building roads like Labour is building Auckland Light Rail. We'll be actually getting things done, and to help bring down emissions on transport, we'll establish a nationwide network of 10,000 public EV chargers, and we'll reduce the consenting requirements for renewable energy investment. And as I mentioned, immigration will be used as a tool to help New Zealand achieve its aims, and growing skills is in fact the fifth part of our economic plan. We're going to up New Zealand's game in competing for the best and the brightest that want to come here, because immigration, like regulation, is about quality, not quantity. And a working economy needs working people. And we're going to ensure that our kids get a much better education at school because they are New Zealand's future workforce. And we're going to help young people get off welfare and into work with targeted support to assist them for those that are trying. And for those that don't, there will be sanctions on their benefits. Now, the final part of our economic plan is backing ourselves to compete on the world stage because we absolutely have the talent to do it. New Zealanders can foot it with anybody in the world. Now, trade is at the heart of New Zealand, and it's at a key driver of our prosperity. And we're going to invest more in those relationships where we see opportunities for more trade. We will work relentlessly to remove the barriers that make it so hard to get our high-quality products and services to those markets to sell. We'll also give tourism a boost with a new Great Walk and broaden the eligibility for working holiday visas, because those are a big source of labour, especially for tourism and hospitality industries. So in closing, what I'd just say is National's plan for rebuilding economic growth is comprehensive, it's decisive, it's common sense, it's practical, and it'll work. A national government will be a government that actually gets things done. We will rebuild not only New Zealand's economic growth that is forecast to be so worryingly anemic, but we'll restore the country's mojo, we'll restore the country's confidence, and we are going to restore this country's ambition. I tell you, we have everything to be a successful country out there in the world. There are no excuses for why we cannot do well for ourselves. The only problem we've got is we need a government to actually unleash it. And if urgent action to strengthen the economy is not taken, as Nicola said, more and more New Zealanders will find themselves dropping their children and their grandchildren off at the airport as they head off overseas on search of better jobs, better wages, and better living standards. And none of us want that. I don't want that. You don't want that. So my message to all New Zealanders doing it incredibly tough right now is that help is on the way. Our 100-point common sense economic plan will rebuild the economy to get it working for you. A stronger economy is how we reduce the cost of living. A stronger economy is how we importantly get the public services we deserve and so desperately want. I want you to know we back you. We want you to be being part of this rebuild as well. Thank you again for being here today. Really appreciate it. And with that, I'll pass back to Mahesh. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming in today. We've heard a wonderful discourse in regards to the current state of play, and there are so many candidates and MPs here, and when we go out door knocking, we hear the stories. We hear the stories of the father who's had to sell his construction vehicle to pay rent. We hear the story of the single mother who's got to pay bills and is struggling. And as much as you talk about the economy, these are the pieces, right? And thank you, Nicola, and thank you, Christopher, for charting out a clear piece around the financial situation of the country and a brave new economic future. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, if everybody could get up and move to the back, of the hall now, we'll leave this space for press proceeding. Thank you so much. Please go back. Thank you. Did you want your phone?
Thanks. Thanks, mate. All ready to go? Hey, well, listen, good afternoon, everybody. Can I say thank you for coming along? I just want to acknowledge the situation that we're seeing in Otago and Southland. And not that a couple of weeks ago we were in Queenstown and to see the floods and the slips that are happening, and our thoughts are with the first responders and the people being impacted down there with the floods and the extreme weather. Can I just also say, today we announced 100 economic actions that are common sense, practical responses to actually how we get this economy rebuilt. As I keep saying, this election, when you strip away all the noise, it all comes down to the economy, and that is the thing that makes the biggest difference to the most amount of people in this country. We have to build this economy back so we can reduce the cost of living and actually create the conditions for us to be able to invest back in infrastructure and also in our public services. With that, happy to take any questions.
The first thing that you've said...
Sorry.
How much is the 100-point plan going to cost?
Well, as we've said, we've announced over 40 policies in this election campaign already. We've been very prudent, very responsible, showing good economic management, and actually this is an aggregate and bringing all those actions together in this plan. So each of the individual actions, in the case of introducing our family boost policy, for example, we've funded that from actually pulling back and cutting out consultant spends, and we've been very practical about how we get about it.
The first thing
do you know how much you've put all those together in a nice big document? Do you know how much?
Well, it'll all come together in our fiscal plan, which you'll see very shortly.
The first thing that you've said in your fact sheet is the Reserve Bank predicts New Zealand is already back in recession. How could that possibly be true when yesterday they said that we were out of recession? There's Stats New Zealand who compiled the figures.
Sure. Yesterday we saw some numbers that reframed our economic data over the last last 2 quarters, which is fine. But what's very obvious is that you can see the Reserve Bank has forecast that we'll be back in negative growth over the course of the September quarter that we're in now. And you've also seen an IMF forecast that's essentially saying New Zealand's got 1% growth a year for the next 2 years.
So that doesn't make any
we're very
sense.
anemic, very low, very limited amounts of growth in this economy.
Stats New Zealand, who compiles the data, say that we're not in recession. We need 2 negative quarters of GDP to be in a recession, so that would be essentially this quarter and then the December quarter as well. So are you saying that's what the Reserve Bank is saying?
The Reserve Bank forecast is that we are going to be in negative growth, certainly in the September quarter.
Can I help here? So Stats New Zealand have given us data that corresponds to the last period.
Mm-hmm.
What the Reserve Bank have done is forecasts for what's happening right now and what's going to happen in the next 6 months. And what they've said is happening right now is that our economy is shrinking. They've given a quarterly forecast that it's in contraction. They've then said that in the next quarter it will also be in contraction. New Zealand defines 6 months of contraction as recession. Mm-hmm. So according to the Reserve Bank forecast, no one knows what's actually happening right now because we don't have the stats data yet, but according to their forecasts, they expect this to be a 6-month period of recession.
So then how can you put that as fact? You've put under a fact box that we predict to be in a recession. That's not a fact. That's
It is a fact that they are predicting that.
Yes, but you've just said no one actually knows what's happening right now. So that is slightly misleading, isn't it?
I disagree because that is the Reserve Bank forecast and we have framed it as their forecast.
So the Reserve Bank
Luxon,
also...
our
the Reserve
forecast-
Bank
Sorry, Lloyd.
the
Yep.
Reserve Bank
Our
also got this.
forecasts and predictions, are they facts?
What I'd say to you is they're the best estimate of what we've got going forward, and we have to say that is the reality of what we're going to face going forward. And so for me, when we say the Reserve Bank of New Zealand is forecasting that we're going to have 2 quarters of negative growth, that is their current best position and assessment of where things sit going forward. Frankly, the reality is for New Zealanders watching this, they know that they're actually facing high levels of inflation. Food prices are going through the roof. They know they're really struggling. You saw new data come out yesterday about the increase in rents. And we know we've got thousands of New Zealanders about to refix their mortgages and having to find $700 extra a fortnight. So New Zealanders see and feel it, as I've been saying. And the reality is, whether you look at a number of different forecasts going forward, the reality is New Zealand has incredibly low, anemic, low growth. That is not an answer that we have to accept. So the forecast is the best estimate and assessment of where things are going, but we do get to change things and actually change where that forecast goes in reality, and that's what this is about today. Well, they are the most official forecast that we can get from the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, other forecasts that we've seen from the IMF about the outlook for New Zealand. And I think we can align and say that's our best forecast that sits there today.
What about the Treasury?
But my answer is very clearly that we get to change that outcome. We get to change that forecast if we put actions in place to determine that we want to do something different
Why are
about
you using
that.
the Reserve Bank? Why not the Treasury?
Well,
The Treasury have a
it's
different
just
set of
the
data.
Reserve Bank is the ones that have been saying we're probably in negative growth this September quarter, likely to be again in December quarter. We've seen an IMF forecast
But
for the
the
next 2
Treasury's not
years at
saying
low
that.
levels of growth, and what we've seen is stats then go back and with revisionist data and updated data, update the last 2 quarters.
Reserve Bank also were wrong by 0.4% in their last prediction.
Yeah.
If they're
They
wrong
were.
0.4% this time, no, it will show that we aren't in a recession.
Sure, but
By positive 0%.
I just say to you, this is the wrong conversation. The reality is step out and step out. Well, it's our forecast, right? It's the most accurate forecast that governments use to say here's the outlook going forward, and that's all that this is about. But the reality is we have low anemic growth, and whichever way you make the assessment going forward, that is something that we should be trying to change in New Zealand. We shouldn't just be accepting that the forecast is going to become our reality. We need to put a series of actions together to actually change the economic outcomes for New Zealand. We can't just sleepwalk in accepting that forecast is as good as it gets in this country. And that's what I'm interested in, is about action and making sure that we put these 100 actions into place that actually unblock the economy, get it moving, get people investing, get people wanting to take on risk and actually innovate and get the show back on the road, because this is not a great outcome for New Zealanders.
If you do that in the economy grows, the economy could grow too fast and will add to inflation and actually just keep the problem going.
Well, what I'd say to you...
How do you get that balance?
Well, look, I mean, let's be clear. We have Chris Hipkins in economic la-la land. This is Chris Hipkins and Grant Robertson who have increased government spending by 80%. They've added $125 million extra a day on tax. They've blown our debt out from $5 billion to $100 billion. This is a government that has an economic plan that is quite simply spend more, tax more, borrow more. That is not a pathway of success for New Zealand. We have seen the actions of that over the last 3 years. It hasn't worked, and we need a different plan to do it. We understand the economy. We've built this 100-point action plan in concert with New Zealanders and also in concert with the business community to say these are the practical things that get the show unblocked and get the country back on track and moving with some positivity, some ambition going forward. And it's our best shot to start to change the forecast becoming our reality, which we do not accept as a reality for New Zealand that we want.
The allegations surrounding Shannon Halbert, how has Labour handled them?
Well, look, that's ultimately a decision for Chris Hipkins and the Labour Party.
How confident are you of flipping that Northcote seat?
Critical given his comments about your MP Tim.
Well, it's obviously it's an issue for Chris Hipkins and the Labour Party, as I say. You know, again, my bigger issue is actually hearing Chris Hipkins today say that he's going to work seamlessly and wonderfully with the Te Pāti Māori and the Greens. I mean, this is a leader of a political party who can't even work with his own cabinet and his own caucus and manage them and lead them well. And you throw the mess of Te Pāti Māori and the Greens on top, both wanting a wealth tax that will put a wrecking ball through our economy. That is incredibly worrying. But ultimately, I'd say that's an issue for Chris Hipkins.
The Northcote seat, though, how confident are you of flipping that back?
Well, we are working incredibly hard across the country. I've spent a big part of the first part of the campaign in marginal seats up and down this country. We've been in historically Labour seats, we've been in marginal seats, and you know we see huge enthusiasm. New Zealanders want to change the country, the direction of the country. It's that simple. They want change. They're over it. This is a government that's had an absolute majority for 3 years and couldn't get anything done. New Zealanders know that if they just let them carry on, that's a recipe for disaster for us. And so, very clearly for us, the message is simple. If you want to change the government, guarantee a change of government, party vote national. We're making that case in marginal seats, red seats, and blue seats.
And you talked about coalition arrangements there. Did you get a chance to watch the debate last night?
I haven't seen the debate last night, no.
There was quite a lot of conflict between...
chaos on your side. I mean, are you prepared?
No disrespect, but I back my ability to lead a coalition incredibly well and get the best out of that.
So you can wrangle them. I mean, did you see David Seymour and Winston?
I haven't seen the debate from last night.
Have you spoken to Winston at all?
Sitting around the cabinet table with David Seymour and Winston Peters.
Well, look, I'd say to you, and my message has been very consistent over a number of months. There is so much at stake, and do not put at risk putting Chris Hipkins, who can't lead his own party, with Te Pāti Māori and the Greens together in a government. That is an absolute coalition of chaos. You've got one party that wants to abolish prisons and another party saying they're going to be tougher on crime this time. It doesn't make any sense. So if you want to change the government, you have to guarantee a guaranteed change as a party vote for national. And that's what I've been consistent about.
Do you trust Winston Peters? Because last night you had him in the debate say that in the 2017 negotiations, Bill English said to him right at the starting point that there was going to be a coup and that Judith Collins was going to roll him, and so Winston Peters said, well, I can't deal with that, and that's part of the reason he went with Labour. Bill English has told Newsroom that that is a complete fabrication and utterly untrue. Can you actually trust Winston Peters?
Well, my message to the New Zealand people is don't put this election at risk. 3 years ago, this country voted in every single electorate for the Labour Party except for one, Epsom, who voted for the National Party. And so that party vote put in place an absolute majority and a government with an absolute majority that actually hasn't taken this country forward. The country's gone backwards over the 3 years. So don't put that at risk again. Be very intentional about what you're going to do with your party vote and party vote national.
Well, David Seymour and Winston Peters obviously think that there is potentially going to be a situation where they're working together, because David Seymour's completely softened his position in the last week and is now saying he would work with Winston Peters, when a couple of weeks ago that was unheard of. So they're obviously lining up thinking that Winston Peters is going to be in play.
Well, again, I just boil it back to say there's a lot at risk at this election. If you want a guaranteed change of government, party vote national. It's been my consistent theme. But I want New Zealanders to understand
that they're going to need New Zealand first. So what is your position on that?
Well, what I'd say to you is I do not want New Zealanders actually doing anything other than voting for any other party other than the National Party. It's that simple, because there is a lot at stake at in this country. We cannot have an economic situation and that forecast that we just talked about becoming reality. We need strong national-led government, and I'm confident we'll have strong, stable government on the other side. But I tell you what's not going to work is Chris Hipkins, who can't lead his own cabinet in caucus, has had a 3-year absolute majority and got nothing done and taken the country backwards. And then you throw Te Pāti Māori with its co-leaders on board, and then you throw in the Greens with its co-leaders on board, and I'm telling you, you've got an unholy mess at that point in time.
What's the timeline on the release? This seems like a really weird question, but I'm quoting Winston Peters here. Will you keep your trousers on in coalition negotiations?
Again, I'm not focused on that. I'm focused on making sure that New Zealand people understand what's at risk at this election and why a national party with a 100 economic point plan to get this economy firing, get it growing again, so that they've got opportunities that they can get ahead is actually what they need to be focused on. The New Zealand people, the New Zealand people will determine the outcome of this election, and that's why I'm talking directly to them to make it incredibly clear for them. Do not muck around. Do not be non-intentional with your party vote. MMP elections are notoriously and always close and tight. So you need to understand what is at risk. We have been here before. This country voted in overwhelming terms to send a Labour government into power with an absolute majority 3 years ago. And nothing happened. The country went backwards. So be intentional this time round. Party vote national.
How much on this campaign trail do you think that you were getting face time with undecided or swing voters?
I think we've had a huge amount of that, and I've been doing that actually for a number of months now with the Back on Track tour, where I've spoken to 11,000 sort of people. And in the campaign trail,
look at like today, or do you think you're getting a lot of face time with people you could persuade?
If you've been with me over the last 2.5 weeks, you'd seen I've been into many, many marginal seats and red seats and Labour seats. And why are we doing that? Because actually we have a huge opportunity to actually increase our party vote, even in historical Labour strongholds. If I look at my observations of Chris Hipkins, he's trying to save his furniture, and he's actually going to deep red seats, and actually that's where he's spending his time.
What's the rationale for going back to Auckland every night?
Well, it's just actually how my schedule works, in terms of just how the schedule works. So it's a good base for us to execute from and go out where we need to go the next day.
Touting police stats showing ram raids at a 2-year low.
Well, no disrespect, but this government's had 6 years to sort out our law and order challenges in this country. I saw a ridiculous proposition, I think yesterday or the day before, where Hipkins comes out and says, actually, I'm sorry, we're actually going to get rid of our only target that we had on crime and law and order, which was a 30% reduction in the prison population. You're going, yeah, right. You've had 6 years, and 11 days out from an election, you say and do anything you can to see whether you can win it, and that ain't going to cut it. Because the New Zealand people know they are not feeling safe in their homes, their businesses, their communities. The New Zealand people see crime each and every day. Just look at the images in the last 72 hours across this country. And they see violent crime up, they see retail crime up, they see growth in gang membership, see ram raids happening multiple times a day. So, we get to choose that, and that's what I'm saying to the New Zealand people. This election is a really important one because it's going to shape where we go as a country for generations to come. We get to choose whether we accept that every 6 months there's more frequency, more violent, more gratuitous crime.
It's showing it's at a low.
I'd just say to you, go talk to the New Zealand people, and they see violent crime, they see retail crime. No, violent crime's up 30%, retail crime's up 100%. There are 9 gang members for every 10 police officers in this country. There is a ram raid happening every 11 hours in this country. And so those are the reality of what's happening, and New Zealanders do not feel safe under this government. It's been soft on crime. And I'll just say one more thing I want to say is that it's very interesting to me, isn't it? We've seen Harry Tam have 13 different hui out there trying to enrol gang members to actually support the Labour Party. And that just says everything. That the gangs don't want a national law and order policy. They don't want people like Mark Mitchell who understand what it's like at the front line and how we back our police. In Australia, We've taken very similar laws and approaches that we've seen in Western Australia and Queensland in our policies, and the gangs are actually forming their own political party over there. Well, here in New Zealand, they don't need to do that because they can actually just support the Labour Party.
I mean, you talk about misinformation, and you've got your fact-checking website, and Chris Bishop standing behind you has made a big deal about this. But Labor would be furious that you're saying that they're endorsing this.
Well, why don't we have every single Labor candidate?
They can't.
Well, why don't we have Chris Hipkins come out very strongly and say he does not want their vote and reject it outside? Why, if he's so strong about it, why has this government given them $2.7 million worth of rehab money? When you think about that, why, when there was a cabinet paper taken to cabinet just in the, recently, they actually decided they'd continue to fund connections with gangs?